Before I tell you this story, I need you to do something for me. Wherever you are watching this from, type it in the comments right now, your city, your country. I want to know who is sitting with me while I tell you this. And if you believe that family secrets have a way of finding the light no matter how deep they're buried, hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you, I have never told another living soul outside my own kitchen. Not my neighbors, not my bishop, not even, until the very end, my own children. So settle in, because this is the story of how my father told me my mother was dead, and how, at the age of 63, I found out that wasn't true. My name doesn't matter for this story. Where I grew up doesn't matter either. Not exactly. Because there are settlements like mine scattered all through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and if I told you the name of my town, you might think you knew people I grew up with. And maybe you would be right. And maybe that would cause trouble for families who are still there. Still farming the same land. Still going to the same church services, in the same barns and front rooms. So I will just say I grew up Amish, in a small old order community. The kind where the roads are still dirt in some places, and the loudest sound on a summer evening is the creak of a windmill and the clop of a horse 2 farms over. I will tell you my story the way I lived it, and you can decide for yourself what it means. My mother's name was Katie. That much I can tell you, because it was such a common name among us that it gives nothing away. I was 4 years old when my father sat me down at the kitchen table. I remember the table because it had a burn mark on one corner from where my older brother had set down a hot iron once, and he told me that my mother had gone to be with God. He said it just like that. Gone to be with God. He didn't cry when he said it. My father was not a man who cried, not in front of us children, not ever, not even at funerals, though I would later learn there was a great deal buried behind his eyes that he never let out. I don't remember my mother. That is the strange, aching thing at the center of this whole story. I don't remember her at all. I was too young. I have no memory of her face, her voice, the smell of her, nothing. All I had growing up was a story, told to me in pieces by my father and my aunts. That my mother had gotten sick with something in her blood, some kind of fever that the doctors could not fix, and that she had died in the winter when I was not yet 2 years old, and that my father, in his grief, had waited 2 years to tell me, because he did not know how to say the words to a child so small. That was the story. I built my whole understanding of myself around that story. I grew up believing I was the daughter of a widower, a hard-working, quiet, sorrowful man who had lost the love of his life and never remarried, who raised 5 children alone with the help of his sisters and the women of the church, who worked his dairy herd from 4 in the morning until dark, and who, I believed with my whole heart, had loved my mother so much that her death had hollowed something out of him forever. I want you to understand something about my father before I go further, because it matters for everything that comes after. He was not a cruel man. I need to say that clearly, because when people hear what I am about to tell you, they want to make him into a monster, and he was not that. He was strict. Yes, he was silent in the way that many Amish men of his generation were silent, carrying things inside them like stones in a field, things you plow around instead of digging up. He believed in hard work and quiet faith and keeping your troubles between yourself and God. He never once raised his hand to me in anger. He tucked me in at night when I was small. He taught me to milk a cow before I could properly count to 20. He sat with me on the porch on summer evenings and named the stars in German the way his own father had named them for him. I loved him. I want that understood before anything else. Whatever this story becomes, it does not erase that I loved my father, and in my own complicated way. After everything, I still do. I grew up in a house full of women who were not my mother, but who loved me like their own. My father's sister, my Aunt Fanny, moved in with us for the first several years after my mother died, and she was the one who braided my hair before church, who taught me to can green beans and pickle beets, who scolded me when I ran too wild in the fields with my brothers. There was also a woman from the community, a widow herself, who came several days a week to help with the cooking and the wash until I was old enough to take on those chores myself. Between them, I never lacked for female guidance, but I lacked, always, the particular thing that only a mother gives, and I did not even know I lacked it. Because how can you miss a color you have never seen? Sometimes at night, lying in my bed under the eaves with my sister Sarah breathing slow beside me, I would try to conjure my mother's face. I would ask my father what she looked like, and he would go very still, the way he did whenever the subject came up, and he would say, "She had your eyes." That was all he ever gave me. She had your eyes. I used to stare into the small mirror we were allowed for practical purposes. Never vanity, my father would remind me, and I would look at my own brown eyes and try to imagine them belonging to someone else. Some ghost woman I would never meet, and I would feel something in my chest that I did not have a word for yet. Grief, I suppose, though it is a strange kind of grief to mourn someone you cannot remember. There was a small cemetery behind our church district's meeting house. Rows of plain stones, unmarked in the very old tradition of some communities, though ours allowed simple markers with just a name and dates. I asked my father once, when I was maybe 7, if we could visit my mother's grave. I remember the way his jaw tightened. He told me she was not buried there. I asked him where, then, and he said she had been from another settlement, further west, and that she had been taken back there to be buried among her own family. He said it was too far to visit, that it would take days by horse and buggy in those times, that it was better to let her rest, and to keep her in my heart, instead of chasing after a stone in a field I would never see. I accepted this the way children accept most things adults tell them, without question. Because why would my father lie to me about something so sacred as where my own mother was laid to rest? I share all this with you not to drag it out, but because I need you to understand how completely I believed this story, for how many decades I believed it, so that you can understand what it did to me when I learned the truth. This was not a small crack in my understanding of my life. This was the whole foundation. I grew up as Amish children do, working the farm, going to our one-room schoolhouse until 8th grade, and then working full-time at home, and eventually taking on outside work as well. I did quilting and canning that we sold at a market stand, and later I helped clean houses for some of the English families in the area, which is what we call anyone who is not Amish. I went through my Rumspringa, which for me was a quiet affair. Nothing like what people picture when they hear that word from the television shows. I went to a few singings. I rode in a car exactly twice, both times with a cousin who had a driver's license, and a strong sense that we should be back before dark. I was baptized into the church at 19, and I married a good man named Amish when I was 21. A farmer from 2 districts over, and I moved into his family's old farmhouse and began the long, steady work of building my own life, my own household, my own family. I had 6 children. I buried one, a little boy, at 8 months old, from complications no doctor could have prevented. And I want to tell you, if you have ever lost a child, that the grief of that never fully leaves. It only learns to sit quietly in a corner of your heart while you go on living. I raised my other 5 the way I was raised, with hard work and scripture and long silences that said more than words sometimes could. I became, without quite realizing it was happening, a woman very much like the aunts and the widow women who had raised me. Capable, steady, a keeper of a household. A woman who did not ask too many questions about the past. Because the past, in our way of living, is something you are taught to leave in God's hands. My father lived to be 89 years old. He worked his farm well into his 70s, until his hips gave out and he had to hand the operation over to my younger brother Eli, who still farms it to this day. He never remarried. Not once, in all those decades, did he so much as court another woman, and the community regarded this as a testament to how deeply he had loved my mother, the widower who never let go. I regarded it that way too, for my whole life. It was, I thought, one of the most beautiful and saddest things about him, that his heart had simply closed after she died, and never opened again. He died 4 years ago, in the spring, in the same farmhouse he had raised us in, with my brother Eli and Eli's wife caring for him in his final months. I was there, in the room, along with 3 of my other siblings when he passed. It was peaceful. He had made his peace with God, he told us, in his last clear days, and I believed him, because that was the kind of man he was, not a man who left things unsettled, or so I thought. It was 3 weeks after the funeral when the family gathered at Eli's house to begin the long, quiet work of going through Dat's. That's what we called him. Dat, it means father. Going through Dat's belongings, that I found the box. It was an old cedar box, the kind used to store quilts and keep the moths away, pushed to the very back of the top shelf in his bedroom closet, behind stacks of folded shirts and a hat box. I almost didn't notice it. Eli had asked me to go through Dat's clothes, decide what could be given to the church's used clothing donations, and what should be kept, and I was standing on a small step stool reaching for a shirt, when my hand brushed the corner of that cedar box, and it nearly toppled off the shelf onto my head. I set it down on the bed. It was locked. A small brass lock. Old-fashioned, the kind you'd find on a jewelry box or a diary. I sat there for a long moment just looking at it. In our way of life, privacy is respected even after death. Many families would have simply set aside a locked box and either found the key or left it be, according to what felt right. But something in me, some instinct I still cannot fully explain, told me I needed to open that box. I found the key eventually, in an old cigar tin in his dresser drawer, mixed in with cufflinks he never wore. He was Amish, after all. We don't wear cufflinks. And old coins and a pocket knife with a cracked handle. The key was small and simple, and it turned in the lock on the first try, like the box had been waiting. Inside, there were letters, dozens of them, tied in bundles with string, yellowed with age. There was a small photograph, which surprised me greatly, because our community did not permit photographs. We believe in avoiding graven images, avoiding vanity and pride. But there it was, a black and white photograph, cracked at one corner, of a young woman standing in front of a farmhouse I did not recognize, wearing a plain dress but no head covering. Her hair loose around her shoulders in a way that told me, even before I understood anything else, that this photograph had been taken after she left our way of life, or before she had ever fully entered it. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting I recognized instantly as my father's, it said, Katie, 1974. My mother's name was Katie, I sat on that bed for what felt like an hour, just holding that photograph, my hands shaking so badly I had to set it down twice. Then, I picked up the bundle of letters, and I began to read, and by the time I finished the first one, I understood that everything I had believed about my life, every single thing, was built on a lie. The letters were from my mother, not letters from before her supposed death, letters from after. The most recent one, based on the postmark on its envelope, had been sent only 6 years earlier, when I was already 57 years old and had grandchildren of my own, when I had already spent decades believing this woman was dead and buried in a settlement I had never visited, among family I had never met. My mother was alive. My mother had been alive my entire life. My father had lied to me, had lied to all of us, all 5 of his children, for over 60 years. I don't know how long I sat there. Eli found me eventually, called up the stairs asking why I was taking so long with the closet, and when I didn't answer, he came up to check on me. And he found me sitting on our father's bed, with a box of letters in my lap, and tears running down my face in a way I had not cried, I think, since I was a very young girl. I need to tell you what was in those letters, but first I need you to understand what I felt in that moment. Because I think it is important, and I think if you have ever discovered that someone you trusted completely had been hiding something enormous from you, you will understand this feeling. It was not only grief. It was not only anger, though the anger came later, in waves, hot and sudden, catching me at strange times, washing dishes, kneading bread, lying awake at 2 in the morning. In that very first moment, sitting on my father's deathbed, what I mostly felt was a kind of vertigo, like the floor of my whole life had opened up beneath me, and I was falling through 63 years of memories that I now had to look at completely differently. Every memory I had of my father telling me about my mother's death, the sickness in her blood, the burial far away, the story of a love so deep it had closed his heart forever. Every single one of those memories I now had to hold up to the light and ask, was this a lie too? How much of it? All of it? Some of it? Eli sat down beside me on the bed, and I handed him the letters without a word, because I could not yet form the words myself. I watched his face as he read the first one, watched the color drain out of it the same way it must have drained out of mine. My brother is a steady man, not given to outbursts, but I watched his hands begin to tremble as he turned the pages, and when he finished the first letter, he set it down very carefully, like it might break. And he said, in Pennsylvania Dutch, the words we still use for our most private moments, even though we speak English for everything else, he said, this cannot be true. But it was true. We spent the rest of that day, the 2 of us, and then our other siblings when they arrived that evening, reading through that box of letters together at the kitchen table, the same kitchen, I realized with a chill, where my father had first told me, at 4 years old, that my mother had gone to be with God. Here is what we pieced together, from the letters, and later, from my mother's own mouth. My mother, Katie, had married my father when she was 19, and he was 23. Both of them raised in the same church district. Both of them baptized and committed to the Amish faith the way was expected of every young person who wished to marry within the community. They had 5 children together in relatively quick succession. Myself being the youngest, and by all outward appearances, theirs was an ordinary Amish marriage, no different from any other on the surface. But my mother, according to her letters, had struggled for years with something that today, I understand, would likely have been called a deep depression, Though we did not have that language for it in our community at that time, and in many ways still do not fully have it now, she wrote about long periods where she could barely rise from bed, where the weight of the farmhouse and the 5 children and the endless cycle of chores felt like a stone crushing her chest. She wrote about asking my father, more than once, if she could see an outside doctor, a doctor who dealt with troubles of the mind, and about my father refusing. Not out of cruelty, exactly, but out of a belief system that held that such troubles should be brought to God and to the church elders, not to English doctors who did not understand our way of life. She wrote about a particular winter, the winter I would have been not yet 2 years old, the very winter my father told me she had died, when things came to what she called. In one letter, the breaking point, she had, by her own account, suffered what I can only describe as a complete collapse, a period of such profound despair that she frightened herself and frightened my father. And in the aftermath of that collapse, rather than seeking help within our community's very limited framework for such things, my father and the church elders made a decision that I still, even now, struggle to fully comprehend the reasoning behind. They arranged for my mother to leave. I want to be very careful and fair here, because I have had years now, well, months. It has not even been years yet since I found the box, to think about this, and I do not believe it is as simple as my father simply casting her out because he wanted her gone. From what I have since learned, both from the letters and from long conversations I will tell you about shortly, the decision was framed, at the time, as being for my mother's own good and for the good of the family. There was a belief, however misguided we would now consider it, that my mother's troubles were spiritual in nature, that she was being tested or tormented in a way that the quiet, structured life of the farm and church could not heal, and that perhaps time away, time to find herself right with God, as one letter phrased it, quoting words my father himself had apparently used, might restore her. But it did not go the way I think anyone truly intended. Because once my mother left, and she left, according to the letters, in the dead of night, driven by an English neighbor to her own sister's house 3 states away. A sister who had left the Amish faith herself years before. Once she was gone, my father made a decision that changed the entire course of both their lives, and mine, and my siblings. He did not tell the community that she had left. He told them, and he told us, his own children, that she had died. I have asked myself 1,000 times since finding that box, why? Why that particular lie? When the truth, even a partial truth, your mother is unwell and has gone to stay with family to recover, would have been so much less devastating. And the answer I have come to, the answer that emerged slowly over months of reading and rereading those letters and eventually speaking with my mother directly, is this: shame. A shame so deep and so total that my father could not bear for his children, or his community, to know that his wife had left him, had, in the eyes of our church, essentially abandoned her family and her faith. In our way of thinking at that time, a wife leaving her husband and children was almost unthinkable, a scandal that would follow our family for generations, that would affect my siblings and my own prospects for marriage within the community, that would mark us all as coming from a broken, disgraced household. Death, by contrast, was clean. Death was sorrowful but respectable. A widower raising 5 children alone was a figure of quiet dignity in our community, a man to be admired and supported. A husband whose wife had left him was a figure of scandal and suspicion. My father, in the depth of whatever grief and shame and confusion he was carrying in that terrible winter, chose the lie that let him keep his dignity, his standing in the church, and this is the part that took me longest to forgive, if I have even fully forgiven it yet, that let him keep his children without ever having to explain to us why our mother was not there. He told the church elders the same story, and remarkably, or perhaps not so remarkably, given how insular our communities can be, how little contact we had at that time with the outside world, how completely we trusted the word of a grieving husband, no one questioned it. My mother's own family, the ones who remained in the faith, apparently did question it privately for a time, but by the account in one of the later letters, my father had asked them, practically begged them, not to contradict the story, for the sake of the children, and out of some tangled mixture of respect for his wishes and their own complicated feelings about my mother having left, they went along with it. And so I grew up believing my mother was dead, while somewhere out there, in the world beyond our fences and our fields, she was alive, writing letters to my father that, as I would learn, he answered only rarely and only briefly. Letters in which she begged, over and over across the decades, simply to see her children, or at least to know how we were doing. And letters in which my father, according to his own brief replies which she had kept, and which were also in that box, refused her year after year after year, telling her it was better for the children to believe the story that had already been told, that the truth now would only cause more pain than the lie had, that too much time had passed, that the community would never accept it, that we were happy and settled and did not need the disruption. I read those refusals in my father's own hand, sitting at that kitchen table with my siblings, and I felt something in me break that I do not think will ever fully mend. Because my father was choosing, letter after letter, year after year, decade after decade, to keep his living wife a secret from his own children, even as we grew up and married, and had children of our own. Even as we would have been, by then, fully grown adults perfectly capable of understanding a complicated, painful truth. He kept choosing the lie. Every single year, he chose it again. I want to pause here and tell you a little about what those weeks were like for me, after finding that box, before I ever worked up the courage to do anything about what I had learned. Because I think it is important, and I think some of you watching this may have gone through something similar. Not this exact situation, but the experience of learning a truth so large that you do not know how to hold it, how to carry it through your ordinary days. I went home that night, to my own house, to my husband Amish, who by then had also grown old with me, our own children mostly grown and gone, just the two of us and our youngest still at home finishing her schooling. I sat him down at our own kitchen table, and I told him everything, and I watched his face go through the same disbelief mine had gone through hours before. Amos is a good man, a steady man, and he did not tell me what to do. He simply held my hand across that table and let me cry. And then he asked me the question that I had not yet let myself fully ask. Do you want to find her? I did not know the answer. I want to be honest with you about that, because I think it is easy, telling a story like this after the fact, to make it sound like the moment I found those letters I knew with total clarity that I needed to find my mother. That is not true. For the first several days I felt only grief and anger, and a terrible disorienting confusion. Part of me wanted to burn the whole box in the wood stove and pretend I had never found it. To go back to believing the simple story I had believed for 63 years. Because that story, however sad, had at least been settled. This new truth was not settled. This new truth demanded something of me. There was also, I will admit to you, a deep and complicated loyalty to my father still churning inside me, even as I was furious with him. He had just died. I had just watched him take his last breath, had held his hand, had believed in that moment that I was saying goodbye to a good man who had given his whole life to raising us after a terrible loss. To now go looking for the woman he had spent 60 years hiding from us felt in some confused part of my heart like a betrayal of him, even though I knew, rationally, that he was the one who had betrayed us, betrayed her most of all. I prayed about it the way we do, quietly, in the mornings and evenings, not asking God for a sign exactly, because that is not really our way, but asking for clarity, for peace, for guidance on what a righteous woman would do in my position. I talked with my bishop, carefully, without giving him every detail, simply asking his counsel on a hypothetical situation of a parent who had been deceived about a family matter for many years. He told me that truth, however difficult, is generally to be preferred over comfortable falsehood, and that reconciliation, where possible, is something our faith holds in very high regard. That gave me some comfort, some sense that pursuing this would not itself be a sin, though I still carried a great deal of private uncertainty. It was my daughter, actually, my second youngest, a sharp and tender-hearted woman named Rebecca, who finally pushed me toward action. I had told her the story. I decided fairly early on that I could not carry this alone, that I needed at least one person in the next generation to know, and she looked at me and said something I have thought about every day since. She said, "Mem," which is what my children call me, "you have spent your whole life believing you had no mother. You have a chance now to find out that isn't true. How could you not take it?" So I decided I would find my mother if she was still alive. The most recent letter in the box was 6 years old, as I mentioned, and it had a return address on the envelope, a small town in Ohio, several hours' drive from where I lived. My mother would have been, by my calculations, 82 years old if she was still alive. I did not know if she still lived at that address, if she was even still living at all. But it was the only thread I had, and I decided I had to pull it. I could not simply show up. I understood that much. I did not know what condition I would find her in, whether she would even want to be found by a daughter who had, in her eyes, likely grown up believing terrible things about her. Believing she was dead, yes, but also, in the years before that, perhaps not even fully understanding why she had struggled the way she had, why she had needed to leave in the way that she did. I decided I would write first, a letter of my own, to match the decades of letters she had sent into what must have felt like a void. Writing that letter took me nearly 2 weeks. I would sit down at my kitchen table in the evenings, after the dishes were done and Emma had gone to bed, and I would try to find words for something that had no good words. How do you write to a mother you do not remember, to tell her that you have just learned she is alive? To tell her that you are sorry for 63 years of silence that was never your fault? To ask her, gently, if she might be willing to see you. I filled pages and tore them up. I cried more in those 2 weeks than I think I had cried in the previous 2 decades combined. The letter I finally sent was short. In the end, I decided that a short, honest letter was better than a long, tangled one. I told her my name. I told her I had found her letters after my father's death. I told her I did not fully understand what had happened between her and my father, and that I was not writing to judge her, only to tell her that I was alive, that I had grown up, that I had married and had children and grandchildren of my own, and that if she was willing, I would very much like to know her, even now. Even after all this time, I told her I forgave her for leaving, though I understand now that forgiveness was never really the thing needed from my side. She had done nothing to me that required forgiving. I signed it with my name, and beneath it, I wrote, "Your daughter." I mailed that letter on a Tuesday morning, driving it myself to the little post office in town, rather than waiting for our regular mail pickup, because I could not bear to wait even one extra day. And then, I began the hardest part of this whole story, the waiting. I want to tell you, before I go further, a little about the 2 weeks of waiting that followed, because I think waiting is its own kind of trial, and I do not want to skip past it as though it were nothing. Every day I found myself listening for the mail carrier's car on the road, which was unusual for me, because ordinarily I paid the mail very little mind. It was Amish who collected it most days, on his way in from the barn. But during those 2 weeks, I made excuses to be near the mailbox around the time the carrier usually came, pretending I needed to check on the garden or sweep the porch, when really I was simply waiting, my heart in my throat every single time a car slowed near our lane. I did not tell anyone else in the family during that waiting period, not my siblings, not my other children, because I did not yet know what there would be to tell. I did not want to raise anyone else's hopes or stir anyone else's grief over a letter that might never receive a reply, or might receive a reply that said, gently or not so gently, that she did not wish to be found. I carried that uncertainty alone, with only Amos and Rebecca knowing, and I found myself praying in a way I had not prayed in years, not the calm, steady prayers of a woman confident in God's plan, but the desperate, repetitive prayers of someone bargaining, asking, "Please, please, just let this go well." Whatever well might even mean in a situation so strange and so far outside anything I had ever prepared for in my 63 years of living. On the 11th day, I received a phone call. Now, I should explain. For those of you not familiar with how many old order communities operate, we do not have telephones in our homes, generally. But many of us have access to a shared phone, often in a small phone shanty at the end of a lane or shared among a few families, used for business calls and emergencies. Mine was a little wooden shanty about a quarter-mile down the road, shared with 2 neighboring farms, and I had, in my letter, given that number, along with the times I typically checked it, in case my mother wished to call rather than write. I was in the shanty that afternoon, as had become my habit, checking for messages on the little answering machine we kept out there. And I found one. I want to tell you honestly, my hands were shaking so badly when I pressed the button to play it that I nearly dropped the whole machine. The voice that came through was thin and old and trembling with what I can only describe as a kind of disbelieving joy. She said my name, spoken by a voice I had no memory of, and yet something in me, something buried so deep I did not know it was there, seemed to recognize it anyway, the way you might recognize a piece of music you heard once as an infant and never consciously remembered. She said, "This is your mother. I got your letter. I have read it every day since it came. I would like very much to see you, if you are still willing, whenever you are ready. I am not going anywhere. I have waited 63 years. I can wait a little longer, if you need the time." And then she left her own phone number, a real telephone number, because she was living, I would learn, in a small English town, no longer part of any Amish community, in a modest house, with a phone of her own. I played that message 4 times before I could bring myself to leave the shanty. I remember sitting down right there on the little wooden bench inside it, my legs simply refusing to hold me up any longer. And I cried in a way that was different from all my earlier crying. Not grief this time. Or not only grief, but something closer to relief. Like a held breath finally released after 63 years. I called her back the very next morning. Amish drove me into town, to a phone booth outside the hardware store. Because I did not want to have this first conversation crowded into the little shanty with the possibility of a neighbor coming by to check their own messages. I stood there with the receiver in my hand for a long moment before I dialed, and when she answered, on the second ring, as though she too had been waiting right by the phone, I could not speak for several seconds. Neither could she. We simply stayed on the line, both of us crying, two strangers who were also, somehow, the closest of kin. Until finally she said, very softly, "Tell me about yourself. Tell me everything. I have missed 63 years, and I would like to hear as much of it as you're willing to give me." We talked for over an hour that day, standing at that phone booth. Amish waiting patiently in the truck, occasionally coming to check on me, with a worried look that softened each time he saw I was still upright, still talking, still, somehow holding together. I told her about my childhood, the parts I remembered, though I was careful, in that first call, not to share too much about the story I had been told of her death, sensing that this would be painful for both of us to dwell on too soon. I told her about my siblings, about my own children and grandchildren, about the farm, about my life, and she told me, in turn, about herself. My mother told me, in that first call and in many calls afterward, about the years after she left. She had gone to her sister's home, as I mentioned, in another state, and had spent nearly a year there simply trying to recover from what she now understood, with the benefit of decades of hindsight, and eventually, real medical care. Was a severe depressive episode, compounded by the isolation and pressure of her life on the farm. Her sister, who had left the faith some years before, and had made a life in the English world, helped her find a doctor, a real doctor, who specialized in troubles of the mind. And for the first time in her adult life, my mother received treatment, medication, and what she called talking therapy. That helped her find her footing again. She told me she had written to my father almost immediately after she felt strong enough, asking about us, asking when she might come home, or when we might visit her. She said his first letters back to her were cold, but not entirely without hope. He told her she needed more time, that the children were adjusting, that it was not yet the right moment. She believed him. For a while, she believed, for months, that there was a plan for reunion eventually, that this separation was temporary, however painful. It was nearly 2 years after she left, she told me, with her voice breaking in a way that even now is difficult for me to describe to you, when she received a letter from her own mother, my grandmother, whom I also, of course, believed to be simply my grandmother, with no complicated history attached, informing her, almost in passing, that my father had told the community and the children that she had died. That letter, my mother told me, was the single worst moment of her entire life. Worse than the depression that had nearly broken her. Worse than leaving her children in the middle of the night, she said she felt, reading that letter, as though my father had reached into her chest and taken her heart out entirely. Because in that moment, she understood that whatever plan she believed still existed for reunion had never truly existed at all. At least not on his end. That he had already, in his own mind, buried her. Buried their marriage and moved forward with a story that erased her rather than one that might someday restore her. She wrote to him immediately, she told me, furious, desperate, begging him to reconsider, to tell us the truth, to let her at least send us letters or gifts, anything. And his response, she kept that response too. and read it to me over the phone, her voice shaking with an old, well-worn grief. His response was that the children were happier believing her dead than they would be knowing the truth. That a dead mother was a mother they could mourn cleanly, but a mother who had left was a wound that would never fully close, and that he was, in his words, protecting us by maintaining the story he had already told. He asked her not to contact him again except through his sister, my Aunt Fanny, who I would later learn had known the truth this entire time and had never once told me. A betrayal within a betrayal that took me a long while to come to terms with, though I understand now that Fanny felt bound by a promise to my father that she believed in her own way honored some code of family loyalty. He asked my mother to write only occasionally, and only to him, never to us directly, warning her that any attempt to contact the children directly would only cause pain and confusion, and might, he suggested, even be seen by the community as a further disgrace upon the family. And so my mother, grieving, isolated, still not fully well, made the decision, one she told me she has regretted and questioned every single day for the past 60 years, to comply. To write occasional letters to my father, which he answered rarely, and to otherwise stay away, believing, or trying to believe, that this distance really was somehow protecting us, that perhaps he was right, that perhaps showing up in our lives after being declared dead would cause more harm than good. She told me she came close, many times over the decades, to simply driving to our community herself, to showing up at church, to forcing the truth into the open regardless of what my father wanted. She told me about one particular occasion, when I would have been about 16 years old, when she actually did drive to the edge of our town, sat in a parked car for over an hour, watching families walk to a church service, hoping to catch a glimpse of one of us, and then lost her nerve, or perhaps found a different kind of courage. The courage to leave again rather than upend a life she believed, mistakenly, we were peacefully living without her. She left the Amish church formally a few years after that, unable to reconcile her faith with a community and a marriage that had caused her so much pain. Though she told me she never lost her faith in God, only her faith in the particular way our community had asked her to live it. She remarried eventually, an English man, a kind widower with 2 grown children of his own, and she lived what she described as a quiet, ordinary American life. She learned to drive a car. She worked for many years as a receptionist in a doctor's office. She gardened. She went to a Mennonite church that had a gentler, more forgiving spirit than the one she had left. And she thought about us, about me, and my brothers and sisters, every single day for 63 years, keeping a small photograph album of the only pictures she had, taken secretly before she left, hidden in a drawer that her second husband knew about and respected without ever intruding upon. Her second husband had passed away 8 years before I found her, and she had been living alone since, in that small house in Ohio, with a garden and a cat, and a shelf of photo albums containing pictures of 5 children she had not seen since we were small, growing older in her mind, only through her imagination, because she had, of course, no way of knowing what we actually looked like as adults. I asked her, during one of our calls, why she had kept writing to my father all those years, even when he so rarely wrote back, even after decades of refusal. And she said something that I think about often, something that has helped me understand the strange, tangled love that can exist even in the midst of the deepest hurt. She said, because as long as I kept writing, some small part of me still believed there was a door left open. I could not bear to be the one who closed it. Before I tell you about the day I finally met her face to face, I want to stop and thank those of you who are still watching, still with me through this long story. If you have not yet done so, please take a moment now to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you haven't already told me where you're watching from, I would love to know. Put it in the comments below. It means more to me than you might imagine, to know that people from so many different places are sitting with me through a story this personal. Now, let me continue. We spoke on the phone perhaps a dozen times over the following month, each call a little longer and a little easier than the last. The way I imagine any relationship grows, when two people are willing to keep showing up for it. We talked about small things too, not only the heavy history between us. She asked about my grandchildren's names. I asked about her garden. She told me about her cat, a stubborn old orange tabby named Butter, and I found myself laughing with her in a way that felt entirely new and entirely familiar all at once, as though some old, worn groove in my heart, shaped exactly for a mother's laughter, was finally being used again after 63 years of sitting empty. Eventually, we began to talk about meeting in person. I want to be honest and tell you that I was frightened of this in a way that surprised me. I had crossed the hardest emotional bridge already, I thought. I had accepted that she was alive. I had spoken to her. I had begun to know her in this new way. But the idea of standing in front of her, of seeing with my own eyes a face that was supposed to belong to my mother, a face I had no memory of, filled me with a kind of nervousness I had not felt since I was a young girl on my wedding day. What if I looked at her and felt nothing? What if the 63 years of absence had simply erased the possibility of that particular kind of love? No matter how much my mind wanted to embrace her, Amos drove me. I want to tell you about Amos in this moment, because he deserves it. My husband, who over more than 40 years of marriage had never once had to navigate anything like this with me, who nonetheless sat beside me in that hired driver's van. My hand gripped so tightly in his that I later found small bruises on his fingers from where I had held on, and who did not say a single word the entire 3-hour drive except, every so often, quietly, "You are almost there. I am right here with you." I remember the drive itself only in fragments, the highway signs blurring past, the strange, dizzy feeling of watching my old life recede behind me, while something entirely unknown approached ahead. I remember stopping once, about halfway, because I felt so sick with nerves that I thought I might actually be ill. And Amos held my hand in a gas station parking lot while I breathed slowly and reminded myself of what Rebecca had said to me weeks before. You have a chance to find out you were wrong about having no mother. How could you not take it? We pulled up to a small blue house with white shutters, a modest place with a wraparound porch, and a garden along the front walk bursting with late summer flowers. Zinnias and marigolds, I remember, because I would come to learn, over the following months, that my mother had a particular love for zinnias. A love, I realized with a strange little jolt of recognition, that I shared, that I had always assumed came from nowhere in particular, some quirk of my own taste, but which I now understood might have been passed down to me in the blood, from a woman I had never known. She was standing on the porch when the van pulled into the driveway. I saw her before the van had even fully stopped, and I want to tell you, the moment I laid eyes on her, something happened in me that I still find difficult to put into words. It was not a dramatic thunderclap of recognition. I did not suddenly remember her, the way it sometimes happens in stories, some flood of buried memory rushing back all at once. It was quieter than that, and in some ways stranger. It was simply the unmistakable, bone-deep knowledge, the moment I saw her face, that I was looking at someone who belonged to me, and to whom I belonged, in a way that went beneath memory, beneath even conscious understanding, into whatever part of a person carries the imprint of the very first face that ever loved them. She was a small woman, smaller than I had pictured, with white hair pulled back simply, wearing a plain cotton dress and cardigan, no longer plain in the Amish sense, but simple nonetheless. The clothing of a woman who had, even decades removed from our faith, never quite lost the habit of modesty and simplicity. Her hands, when she raised them to her mouth as the van door opened, were spotted with age, trembling, and her eyes, when I stepped out of that van and our eyes finally met across the short distance of that gravel driveway, I understood, in an instant, exactly what my father had meant. All those decades ago, on those rare occasions he spoke of her at all. She had my eyes, or rather, I had hers. The exact same shade of deep brown. The exact same shape. A detail so small and so enormous, all at once, that it undid me completely. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. We simply stood there, 10 feet apart, looking at each other. 63 years of separation, collapsing into that single silent space between us. And then she took a step toward me, and I took a step toward her, and then neither of us was walking anymore. We were simply running. Two old women running across a gravel driveway toward each other like we were young girls again. And I felt her arms go around me, and I felt her whole body shaking with sobs. And I understood, in that embrace, something I had never once let myself fully feel in 63 years of believing myself motherless. I understood what I had been missing this entire time, even without knowing I was missing it. It felt like coming home to a house I had never actually lived in, but had somehow, impossibly, always remembered. We stood in that driveway for what felt like a very long time, neither of us willing to let go first, both of us crying too hard to speak, until finally she pulled back just far enough to hold my face in both of her trembling hands, and she looked at me, really looked at me, the way I imagine mothers look at newborns, memorizing every feature, and she said, "There you are. There you finally are. My girl. My girl." I do not have adequate words, even now, telling you this story, for what that moment did to the 63-year-old wound I had not even known I was carrying my entire life. I only know that something in me, some quiet, unnamed ache that had lived beneath the surface of every ordinary day since I was 4 years old, finally, for the first time, went still. We spent that whole first day together, sitting on her porch as the late summer light shifted slowly through the afternoon and into evening, Emma's quietly occupying himself with small chores around her yard, sensing, in his gentle way, that my mother and I needed the space to simply be together without an audience. She made tea, the old-fashioned way, on a stovetop kettle, and I remember noticing, with a strange little pang, that she still made it exactly the way I had been taught to make tea as a girl. Strong and dark, steeped far longer than most English people preferred it. Another small, unexplainable inheritance, passed down through no direct teaching at all, simply through blood and instinct. She showed me her photo albums that afternoon, the ones I mentioned earlier, the secret pictures taken before she left. I sat beside her on a small floral sofa in her modest front room, and she turned the pages slowly, narrating each photograph in a voice thick with old tenderness. There I was as an infant, wrapped in a quilt she said she had made herself during her pregnancy with me. A quilt pattern she described in such loving detail that I realized, with a jolt, It was nearly identical to a pattern I myself had used for my own children's quilts decades later, a pattern I had always believed I'd simply invented on my own. There were pictures of my older siblings as small children, gathered around a kitchen table not unlike the one where I would later be told she had died. There was one picture of the whole family together, my father included, taken by a traveling photographer some Amish families would occasionally, quietly permit despite our general avoidance of photographs. A rare exception my mother said my father had allowed, because his own mother had insisted on having one family portrait before she passed. I stared at that photograph for a long time. My father, young, unsmiling in the way of old photographs, but with something soft in his eyes I did not often see in the man I grew up with. My mother beside him, radiant despite what I now knew she had already been quietly struggling with even then. And 5 children arranged around them, the youngest, myself, barely more than a baby, held in my mother's arms. "You don't remember any of this?" my mother said softly, watching my face as I studied the photograph. It was not quite a question. "No," I told her honestly. "I don't remember any of it. I don't remember you at all." I watched something flicker across her face when I said this. Pain, I think, old and familiar. The particular pain of a mother who understands that her own child, through no fault of either of them, has no memory of ever being loved by her. But she nodded, slowly, and she said something I have carried with me ever since, something I think is one of the wisest things I have ever heard spoken. She said, "That's all right. I remember enough for both of us. And now we get to make new memories, ones you'll actually keep." That's not nothing. That might even be better, in its own strange way. A love we get to build with open eyes, instead of one we simply inherited without choosing it. We talked, that first day and in the many visits that followed over the following months, about everything. About her life after leaving, about mine growing up, about the ache we had both carried separately for 63 years without knowing the other carried a matching one. She told me about the guilt she had carried, believing for decades that perhaps she truly had made the wrong choice all those years ago, that perhaps a stronger woman would have fought harder, stayed despite her illness, found some way to be present for us even through her darkest seasons. I told her, as gently and as honestly as I could, that I did not believe this. That from everything she had described to me of that terrible winter, I believed she had been a woman in a genuine crisis, in a community that simply did not have the tools or the understanding to help her, and that leaving to save her own life was not a failure of love, but, in its own tragic way, an act of it, however painfully it played out for both of us in the decades that followed. The hardest part of that first visit, and of many visits after, was talking about my father. I want to be honest with you about this, because I think it is important, and because I know some of you watching this may be wondering how I have made peace, if I have made peace at all, with the man who did this to us both. My mother, remarkably, harbored far less bitterness toward him than I expected, and far less than I myself carried in those early months. She told me that she had spent decades being angry at him, yes, but that somewhere in her later years, particularly after she remarried and found real peace and real help for the illness that had started this whole terrible chain of events, her anger had softened into something more like sorrow. Sorrow for a man, she said, who she believed had genuinely loved her once, who had been utterly unequipped by his upbringing and his community and his own private fears to handle a wife's mental collapse in any way other than shame and concealment, and who had then become so trapped in his own lie that he could not find his way back out of it without, in his mind, destroying the very children he was trying to protect. I am not saying what he did was right. She told me one afternoon, several months into our reunion, as we sat together shelling peas from her garden into a bowl between us. The two of us falling easily by then into the comfortable, wordless rhythm of women who have done this kind of work together their whole lives, even though we had, in truth, only just begun. What he did was a terrible wrong, and it cost us both more than 60 years we can never get back. But I have found, in my own life, that carrying hatred for him all this time has cost me more than it has cost him. He is gone now. He cannot answer for it, cannot explain himself, cannot ask forgiveness or refuse to ask it. All that anger, if I keep holding it, only continues to live inside me, hurting no one but myself and perhaps you, if I pass that bitterness onto how you and I build our own relationship now. I would rather spend whatever years I have left loving my daughter than hating my dead husband. I did not fully agree with her in that moment. I was still too raw, too recently blindsided by the discovery of that box, to feel anything close to that kind of grace toward my father. But I have thought about her words many, many times in the months and now years since, and I have come, slowly, gradually, to something closer to her way of seeing it. Though I will tell you honestly that my path there has not been simple or straight. After that first visit, I knew I could not keep this to myself any longer. I had my own children who knew by then, Rebecca, and eventually all 5 of my children, because secrets, I have learned, have a way of demanding to be shared once they have been let out of their box even a little. But I still had not told my siblings. Eli, who had been there with me the day I found the letters, technically already knew, of course, since he had read them alongside me at that kitchen table. But my other 3 siblings, my older brother Daniel, and my 2 sisters Sarah and Miriam, did not yet know that the mother we had all mourned our entire lives was in fact alive and living only a few hours away. I want to tell you that this was one of the harder conversations of my life. Harder in some ways than reading those letters for the first time. Because I was not only carrying my own grief and confusion, I was about to hand that same grief and confusion to 3 more people who loved me, who trusted me, and who were about to have their entire understanding of their childhood upended the same way mine had been. I gathered them along with Eli at Eli's house on a Sunday afternoon, the same house where I had found the box in the first place, which felt right in its own way, even though it was hard to be back in that room. I did not tell them over the phone or in a letter. I felt they deserved to hear this face to face, the way I would have wanted to hear it myself. I brought the box of letters with me, and I brought the photograph, and I told them, as steadily as I could manage, everything I have just told you. Daniel, my oldest brother, who had been 11 years old when our mother died, and who therefore had actual memories of her, real ones unlike me, was the one who took it hardest in that first conversation. He went very quiet, and then he stood up from the table without a word and walked outside, and I watched through the window as he stood alone in Eli's yard for nearly 20 minutes, his hands on his hips, staring off toward the horizon, and none of us went to him. Because we understood, I think, that he needed that time alone before he could come back and speak. When he finally came back inside, his eyes were red, and he said only, "I remember her voice." I have spent 60 years thinking that memory was the last thing I had of a dead woman. Now you're telling me I could have heard that voice again, any day I wanted, for 60 years, if Dad had simply told the truth. He did not speak much more that day. It took Daniel the longest of all of us to come around to actually meeting her. Nearly 8 months passed before he was ready, and I do not fault him for that. Not even a little. Everyone's path through a shock like this looks different, and forcing it does no good. My sister Sarah, the one who had shared a bed with me our whole childhood, cried the way I had cried, hard and disbelieving. But she was ready to write to our mother within the week, and met her in person not long after I did. My younger sister Miriam had the strangest reaction of all of us, I think, in that she seemed almost unsurprised, and when we asked her why, she admitted, quietly, that she had always harbored a small, nagging doubt about the story we'd been told. She remembered, vaguely, some whispered conversation among the older church women when she was very young. Something about our mother that did not quite match the tidy story of illness and death, though she had never been able to put her finger on exactly what had unsettled her, and had eventually buried the feeling entirely, assuming it was simply a child's overactive imagination. We also, that same difficult year, had to confront Aunt Fanny, my father's sister, who I mentioned earlier had known the truth the entire time. That conversation was, in its own way, even harder than telling my siblings, because Fanny was elderly herself by then, in her late 80s and frail, and I did not want to cause her undue distress, even though I was still working through my own anger at her silence. I went to see her alone, and I asked her, gently but directly, why she had never told me. Never told any of us, across all those decades of caring for us, braiding my hair, teaching me to can vegetables, sitting beside me at every family gathering, knowing this entire time that the woman we mourned was alive. Fanny cried when I asked her this. She told me that she had begged my father, more than once over the years, to reconsider, to at least tell us the truth once we were grown and baptized into the church ourselves. Old enough, she felt, to handle it. But my father had refused every single time, and Fanny, bound by what she described as an old, deep loyalty to her brother, and by a genuine, if I think ultimately misguided, belief that unraveling the lie after so many years would cause more harm than continuing it, chose silence year after year, the same way my father did. She told me she had thought of my mother every single day, had prayed for her, had even, without my father's knowledge, written to her twice over the decades. Brief notes simply letting her know that the children were healthy and well, so that my mother would at least have that small comfort. I did not know how to feel about this revelation, grateful in a strange way, that Fanny had shown my mother even that small kindness, while still deeply hurt that she had never extended that same honesty to me. I have made my peace with Fanny since, mostly, though it took time, and I do not think our relationship will ever be quite what it was before I learned what she had kept from me. I have thought a great deal, in the years since, about how many other people in our wider circle must have carried small fragments of this truth without ever fully speaking them aloud. A neighbor here who found the timeline of my mother's supposed illness strange. An aunt there who exchanged a single guarded letter and never mentioned it again. A bishop from an earlier generation, since passed, who may have known more than he ever counseled my father to disclose. Secrets like this one, I have come to understand, are rarely held by only a single person. They are more often held collectively, in fragments, by an entire circle of people who each convince themselves that silence is not truly their responsibility to break. That surely someone closer to the matter will eventually set it right, until decades pass and no one ever does. I do not say this bitterly, not any longer, only as an observation about how deeply a single lie, once told, can root itself into the soil of an entire community, waiting patiently, sometimes for generations, for someone willing to finally dig it up. I should tell you a little about how the wider community responded, because I know some of you watching this, especially those less familiar with Amish life, may be curious about that part of the story. In our way of living, news travels slowly and carefully, through word of mouth, through the church, through family visits, rather than through any kind of broader public announcement. My siblings and I made the decision, together, not to make some grand declaration to the entire church district, both out of respect for the privacy such a delicate matter deserves, and honestly, out of uncertainty about how such news would even be received after 63 years of an entirely different story being accepted as simple fact. But of course, in a small community, some version of the truth eventually made its way around. Quietly, through conversations here and there, through the simple fact that a woman who had supposedly died decades ago was now occasionally visiting her grown children, sometimes even coming to family gatherings, though she herself, no longer part of the Amish faith, remained respectful of our ways during those visits, dressing modestly, understanding the customs, careful never to draw undue attention to herself within our world. The reactions among the older members of the community, those who remembered my mother from before she left, were mixed, as I suppose you might expect. Some were kind, even relieved, telling me privately that they had always wondered, in some quiet corner of their hearts, whether the story of her death had been entirely true, though none of them had ever felt it was their place to ask. A few were more judgmental, murmuring about a woman who had, in their eyes, still abandoned her family regardless of the circumstances, and about a lie that, however wrong, had at least kept the community's understanding of our family tidy and respectable for 6 decades. I will not pretend that every response was gracious. There were a few uncomfortable conversations, a few cooler receptions at church gatherings in the months that followed. A few older women who I know, even now, still speak of my mother's leaving in hushed, disapproving tones when they think I am not listening. But I want to tell you something important, something that I think surprised me more than almost anything else in this whole long story. The majority of my community, when the fuller truth eventually became known, responded not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet grace that I had perhaps underestimated. My bishop, when I finally told him the whole story, sat with me for a long while in his front room, and he told me something I have held onto ever since. He said that our faith teaches forgiveness and reconciliation above almost all else, that the parable of the prodigal returning is one of the most treasured stories in our scripture, and that whatever judgment anyone in the community might feel tempted toward, the far more faithful response, the response our own beliefs actually call us toward, is welcome, and grace, and the mending of what was broken, wherever mending is possible. He told me my mother would always be welcome, quietly and respectfully, at any gathering where I wished to include her, and that he, for one, held no ill will toward either of my parents, only sorrow for the pain that had passed through our family because of choices made in a much harder, more frightened time. That conversation meant more to me than I can easily express. It gave me a kind of permission I did not realize I had been waiting for. Permission to fully, openly, without shame or secrecy, welcome my mother back into whatever remained of my life, without feeling that I was somehow betraying my community or my faith by doing so. I want to tell you now about the day my mother met her grandchildren for the first time, because I think, out of everything that has happened since I found that box, this may be the moment that healed the most in me. I have 5 living children, and by that point, 23 grandchildren, ranging from grown adults with children of their own, down to little ones still learning to walk. I did not bring her to all of them at once. That felt like too much, too fast for everyone involved. But over the following year, slowly, one family visit at a time, I introduced her to each of my children's households. I will never forget watching her meet my oldest grandson. A tall, quiet young man of 22 by then, married himself with an infant daughter of his own. He is, by pure chance of genetics, the grandchild who most resembles my father in the shape of his face. And I watched my mother's expression shift when she first saw him. Some complicated mixture of tenderness and old pain crossing her features as she recognized, in this young man's face, echoes of the husband who had taken so much from her. But she did not let that old pain stop her from embracing him warmly, from asking him question after question about his life, his farm, his young family, with a hunger for connection that I think had been building in her for 63 years, finally given somewhere to go. She met my great-granddaughter, that same grandson's infant daughter, on that visit as well, a 5-generation photograph, though of course we could not actually take one given our ways. But I remember the moment vividly regardless. My mother, holding a baby who was her own great-grandchild. A baby who existed entirely because my mother had somehow survived a story that had tried, for 63 years, to erase her from our family's history. She held that baby for nearly an hour that afternoon, rocking her gently on that same porch swing where she and I had first embraced, tears sliding quietly down her weathered face. And she said to me, so softly I almost didn't hear it, I never thought I would get to hold anything that came from you. I thought that whole part of my life had simply ended the day I drove away in the dark. I want to talk now about my father's grave, because I think this part of the story matters too, and because I know some of you may be wondering how I have made peace, if I have, with the physical reminder of him that still exists in that small cemetery behind our meeting house, the same cemetery I once asked, as a little girl, to visit my mother's grave, only to be told she was buried too far away to ever see. For the first year after finding that box, I could not bring myself to visit my father's grave at all. I avoided the cemetery entirely, taking longer routes to church to avoid passing near it, and when the community gathered for occasional grave cleaning days, the kind of quiet communal upkeep we do for our burial grounds, I found reasons to be elsewhere. I was not ready. I did not know what I would feel, standing over the resting place of a man I had loved my entire life, and who I had also, in the same breath, come to understand had stolen 63 years from both me and my mother through a lie he chose, deliberately, again and again, never once relenting even as his children grew into adults, perfectly capable of receiving a difficult truth. It was my mother, of all people, who eventually encouraged me to go. She told me, during one of our visits, nearly 2 years after I had first found her, that she thought I was carrying an unfinished conversation with my father, one that visiting his grave might help me have, even if only within my own heart. She told me that she herself, though she had every reason in the world to feel only anger toward him, had made her own private peace years before, sitting alone in her garden one evening, simply speaking aloud to him as though he could hear her, telling him everything she had never gotten the chance to say, forgiving him not because he deserved it or had earned it, but because, she said, carrying that particular stone any longer was doing nothing but wearing a groove into her own heart. So I went, finally, on a quiet spring morning, alone, without telling even Amos where I was headed that day. I stood over my father's simple grave marker, just his name and his dates, plain as our tradition requires, for a long time before I could find any words at all. And when I finally did speak, out loud, to a man who could no longer answer me, I found that what came out of me was not only anger, though the anger was there, sharp and real, and I let myself say it plainly, that what he did was wrong, that it had cost me and my mother and my siblings something that could never fully be given back. 63 years none of us would ever get to live again with the truth instead of the lie. But other things came out too, things I did not expect. I found myself thanking him, even through my anger, for the parts of my childhood that had been genuinely good, for teaching me to milk a cow, for naming the stars for me in German on summer evenings, for tucking me in at night, for the 1,000 small, real kindnesses that had also been true, even inside a life built on a foundation of deception. I found myself standing there, trying to imagine the young man he must have been in that terrible winter, watching his wife collapse under a weight their whole community had no proper name for or way to treat, panicking, making one catastrophic decision in his grief and fear, and then finding himself trapped by that decision for the rest of his life, unable to find his way back to the truth, without, in his own mind, destroying everything he had built to protect us. I do not say this to excuse him. I want to be very clear about that, because I know some of you watching this may feel I am being too generous toward a man who caused so much pain. I am not excusing him. What he did was a profound wrong, one that cannot be undone, one that I believe he will have to answer for, in whatever way our faith teaches that such things are eventually answered for, before God. But I have come to believe, standing at that grave, that a person can hold both things at once, the truth of the harm someone caused, and the truth of the love that also existed alongside it, however tangled and imperfect that love turned out to be. I left that cemetery that morning lighter than I had felt in 2 years, not because I had resolved every complicated feeling I carried toward my father, but because I had finally said, out loud, everything I needed to say, and I had allowed myself, at last, to grieve him, fully, not the simple, sorrowful widower I had believed him to be my whole life, but the complicated, flawed, deeply human man he actually was. Let me tell you what our life looks like now, my mother and I, because I think it is worth sharing, both for those of you who have followed this whole story hoping for something like a happy ending, and for anyone out there who might be sitting with their own broken family history, wondering if it is ever too late to mend something that has been torn for so long. She is 86 years old now, still living in that same small blue house with the zinnias out front, though her garden has gotten smaller each year as her strength has waned, and Butter the orange tabby has since passed on, replaced now by a younger, equally stubborn cat she has named, with a wry little smile I have come to treasure. Butter the second. Her health is not what it once was. She has trouble with her hips, much like my father did in his later years, a small, strange echo between two people who otherwise led such different lives after they parted. I visit her now as often as I am able, usually every few weeks, sometimes more, driven by one of the same hired English drivers our community uses for longer trips, and we spend those visits much the way we spent that very first one, sitting together, talking, shelling peas or snapping beans if the season allows for it, filling in, piece by piece, the enormous gap of 63 years that stood between us. She has met almost all of my grandchildren by now, and several of my great-grandchildren as well. And I want to tell you, watching her with them fills something in me that I don't think I ever knew was empty, until it began, slowly, to be filled. There is a particular kind of joy in watching your mother hold your grandchild. A joy made all the sharper and all the more precious by how nearly it never happened at all. My youngest granddaughter, only 4 years old, has taken to calling her great-grandma Katie, with the easy, uncomplicated acceptance that only small children seem capable of, entirely unburdened by the 63 years of grief and confusion that preceded her arrival in this family. And I confess that hearing that small voice say those words for the first time undid me more than almost anything else in this entire long story. My siblings, too, have each found their own path back to her, in their own time and their own way. Daniel, who took the longest, as I mentioned, now visits her nearly as often as I do, and the two of them have grown close in a way that surprised all of us. Perhaps because Daniel, having had real memories of her before she left, had the most to grieve, and once he allowed himself to begin healing, the most old tenderness waiting to be rediscovered. Sarah and Miriam both visit regularly as well, and we have, as a family, begun a new tradition, an annual gathering each summer at my mother's home, since she is no longer able to travel easily to ours, where as many of us as can manage gather together, English and Amish alike, generations spanning nearly 90 years. Sitting in lawn chairs in her small backyard, eating together, laughing together, building, quite deliberately, quite consciously, the kind of family memories that were stolen from us the first time around. I think often about what my life would look like now if I had never found that cedar box. If I had simply cleared out my father's closet, donated his clothes, and moved on with the settled, simple story I had believed my whole life. I would still believe my mother had died in the winter I was not yet 2 years old. I would have gone the rest of my own life never knowing her voice, her laugh, the particular way she still makes tea far stronger than most people prefer it. The fact that she loves zinnias the same way I do, without either of us ever having taught the other. I try not to dwell too long on that thought, because it is a painful one, but I also think it is important to sit with it, at least for a moment, because it reminds me of something I want to say directly to you, whoever you are, wherever you are watching this from. If there is a secret in your own family, something buried, something no one talks about, something you have always sensed but never quite been able to name, I am not telling you that pursuing it will always lead to a happy reunion like mine did. I know that is not always how these stories end. Some truths, once uncovered, lead only to further grief, further loss, doors that cannot be reopened no matter how much we wish they could be. I do not say any of this lightly, and I do not want to make promises to you that your own story will resolve the way mine did. But I will tell you this, I do not regret opening that box. I do not regret writing that letter, or making that phone call, or standing in that gravel driveway and running toward a woman I had no memory of, but who turned out to be, in every way that has ever mattered, my mother. Whatever pain came with the truth, and there was a great deal of pain, it was, in the end, a truer, fuller kind of pain than the comfortable lie I had lived with for 63 years. And on the other side of that pain, I found something I did not know I was capable of finding at 63 years old. I found a mother, late, imperfectly, after more loss than either of us should ever have had to bear. But I found her all the same, and every single visit we share now, every phone call, every letter, every moment of her holding one of my grandchildren on that same porch where we first embraced, feels like a small, quiet miracle, snatched back from 63 years of silence. I want to talk a little now about something that has changed in me since all of this happened. Something beyond just gaining a mother back. a change in how I think about struggles of the mind and heart. The kind of struggle that started this whole terrible chain of events all those decades ago. I mentioned earlier that our community, at the time my mother fell ill, had very little understanding of what we would now call depression. Very little framework for treating it as anything other than a spiritual failing or a trial to be endured through prayer and quiet endurance alone. I want to tell you that this has changed a great deal since then, even within our more traditional way of life, though perhaps not as quickly or as completely as it should have. After I learned my mother's full story, I began, quietly, carefully, in the way our community allows for such things, to speak more openly with other women in my circle about struggles of the mind, not naming my mother's story directly, in most cases, because that still felt too private, too much hers to share rather than mine, but simply making space, in conversations after church, in quilting circles, in quiet visits between neighbors, for the idea that a woman struggling with deep sadness or overwhelming despair was not failing God, was not weak in her faith, but was, in fact, unwell in a way that deserved compassion and real help. Not shame and concealment. I have, in the years since, gently encouraged more than one younger mother in my community. Women I could see were struggling the way I now understand my own mother once struggled. To seek help, sometimes from our own community's resources, and sometimes, when needed, from outside doctors, a suggestion that even now is not always easily accepted in our more traditional circles, but which I have come to believe, without any hesitation, is far better than the alternative my own family lived through. I have told a few of these women, in careful general terms, that I know a story of a family who once believed silence and endurance were the only faithful response to a mother's collapse, and that the silence cost that family 63 years they can never get back. I do not know if my words have changed very much in the broader shape of our community's thinking, but I hope, in whatever small way I am able, that I am helping to soften some of the same silence that once swallowed my own mother whole. I think, too, about what I want my own children and grandchildren to carry forward from this story, and I have tried, in the years since, to be far more open with them than my father ever was with me. Not reckless with private matters, because our way of life still values a certain quiet dignity around personal struggles, but honest, in a way I think is healthier than the silence I grew up inside of. I have told my own children, plainly, that if they are ever struggling with sadness, with despair, with any burden that feels too heavy to carry alone, I want them to come to me, that I will not judge them, that I will help them find whatever kind of help they need, whether that is prayer and the support of our church, or a doctor's care, or both together, because I no longer believe, the way perhaps my father once did, that these things must be kept entirely separate. I want to say something else too, something about forgiveness, because I know it is a word I have used several times in telling you this story, and I want to be honest about what it has actually meant for me, rather than offering some tidy, simplified version of it. Forgiveness, in my experience of it, has not been a single moment, a single decision made once, and then simply held on to forever after. It has been more like a field that needs to be replowed every season, year after year, sometimes even day after day. There have been mornings, even quite recently, when I have woken with fresh anger at my father, thinking of some particular year, some particular Christmas or birthday or ordinary Tuesday, when my mother was alive somewhere, longing for us, while we sat, entirely unaware, believing her nothing more than a name on a story we no longer even thought to question. That anger still visits me sometimes, and I do not think it will ever fully leave. Not completely. And I have come to believe that this is all right. That forgiveness does not require the complete absence of anger, only a refusal to let that anger be the only thing you carry. There is one more part of this story I want to share with you before I close. Something that happened only a few months ago, which I think captures, better than almost anything else I could tell you, what this whole strange, painful, beautiful journey has come to mean to me. My mother's health took a difficult turn this past winter. A bad fall, a broken hip, the kind of injury that at 86 years old carries real danger with it, real uncertainty about recovery. I drove out to be with her during her hospital stay, sitting beside her bed for long hours the way I imagine any daughter would, and one evening, as the light faded outside her window and the hospital grew quiet around us, she reached over and took my hand, the way she had first taken my face in her hands in that gravel driveway years before, and she said something to me that I have turned over in my mind every day since. She said, "I used to lie awake at night. All those years I was gone, imagining what it would feel like to have you sit beside my bed like this someday, if I ever got sick or old. I used to think it was an impossible dream, something I would never actually get to have, only something to imagine to comfort myself in the dark. And here you are. Here you actually are." And then she laughed, a small, tired laugh, and she said, "Your father took so much from us, but he did not manage, in the end, to take this. He did not get the last word." I have thought about that phrase more times than I can count since she said it. He did not get the last word. Because that is, in a way, exactly what this whole story has become for me. Not merely a story about a terrible lie and the pain it caused, though it is certainly that, but a story about what happens when the people who were wronged by that lie refuse to let the lie be the final chapter. My father spent 63 years writing one particular story about our family. A story of a widower and his motherless children. A clean, sorrowful, respectable story that hid a far messier and more painful truth underneath it. And when I found that cedar box, I was given the chance to write a different ending. One my father never intended. One my mother had spent 63 years hoping for, without ever quite believing she would get to see it. My mother recovered from that hip injury, slowly the way anyone recovers at 86, with physical therapy and patience, and more good days mixed in with hard ones. She is walking again now, with a cane, moving slowly around her small garden, tending what remains of her zinnias, and I visit her as often as I am able. And every single time I pull into that driveway and see her small figure appear on that porch, I feel again some version of that same overwhelming rush I felt the very first time. The rush of running towards someone I had spent 63 years believing I would never get to meet. I want to share one last memory with you. Small and quiet compared to everything else I have told you, but one that I think, in its own way, says more about what has been restored than any of the larger, more dramatic moments in this story. Last autumn, my mother came to stay with Amos and me for nearly 2 weeks, the longest visit we have managed since we found each other, made possible because one of her English neighbors was kind enough to drive her the long distance and stay nearby in case she needed anything beyond what our home could provide. I gave her the small guest room at the top of our stairs, the same room, as it happens, that had once belonged to my own daughter Rebecca before she married and moved away, still decorated simply with a quilt Rebecca herself had made as a girl. Blues and creams in a pattern called Sunshine and Shadow, which felt, when I thought about it later, almost too fitting a name for the room my long-lost mother would sleep in. Those 2 weeks were, I think, the closest I have ever come to understanding what an ordinary life together might have looked like if things had gone differently all those decades ago. My mother rose early, the way I do, the way I imagine she always did, even in her English life. Some habits apparently never fully leaving a person, no matter how many years pass. She sat with me in the kitchen while I made bread, not doing much herself, her hip still not fully trusting itself with standing work, but talking with me the whole while, telling me stories from her childhood, stories about her own mother, my grandmother, whom I had also, of course, believed to be simply an ordinary grandmother with no complicated history attached. Though I now understood that woman too had carried the private grief of a daughter's disappearance for years before her own passing. My mother taught me a few things in that visit that I did not expect to still be capable of learning at my age. Small things. Mostly, the kind of small things a mother teaches a daughter across a whole childhood, except we were doing it compressed into 2 weeks. Both of us laughing sometimes at the strangeness of it. An old woman teaching an old woman things a young woman usually learns. She taught me a particular way of folding pastry dough that her own mother had taught her. A small trick with the butter that I had never quite gotten right in 60 years of baking. And when I finally managed it under her patient instruction, producing a pie crust flakier than any I had made in my whole life, she clapped her hands together like a delighted child and said, "There, now that's mine, passed down properly, the way it should have been passed down 60 years ago." It was such a small thing, a pie crust, and yet I found myself crying quietly over the rolling pin, because it was, in its own modest way, exactly the kind of ordinary inheritance that had been stolen from us, finally, impossibly, arriving anyway. We spent one whole afternoon of that visit going through old photographs again, not just the ones from before she left, but new ones now too. Photographs of my own children and grandchildren, since our community does permit a certain limited use of photographs for practical family record, keeping even if we avoid them for vanity's sake. And I watched her study each face carefully, asking names, asking ages, asking about each grandchild's particular personality and interests, building, methodically, patiently, a mental map of a family she had missed the forming of, but was now determined to know as fully as the time she had left would allow. She told me, toward the end of that visit, sitting together on my own porch this time, rather than hers, watching the sun go down over Amos's fields, that these 2 weeks had given her more peace than any 2 weeks of her entire life, including, she said carefully, weighing her words, including the good years of her second marriage. Because this, she said, this was the piece that had always been missing, the one thing all her later happiness had never quite been able to fully replace. I drove her home myself at the end of that visit, wanting those extra hours together in the car, and when we said goodbye in her driveway, standing in nearly the same spot where we had first embraced, she held my face in her hands again, the way she had that very first day, and she said, "I used to think I had lost everything that mattered the night I drove away in the dark. I know now I only lost the years. I did not lose you. I want you to know that. Whatever else was taken from us, you were never actually lost. You were only waiting, the whole time, for me to find my way back." There is something else I have come to understand in these past years, something I want to leave you with before I close, because I think it is perhaps the truest lesson buried inside this whole long story, truer even than the reunion itself. It is this: silence, however well-intentioned, however dressed up as protection or mercy or love, almost always does more damage in the end than the painful truth it is trying to shield people from. My father believed, or at least told himself he believed, that he was protecting 5 small children from a pain too large for them to carry. The pain of a mother who had left, the shame of a broken marriage, the confusion of a mind unwell in a community with no gentle words for such things. And perhaps, in that very first year, there was some real mercy in giving small children a simpler story to hold on to, while they were too young to hold anything more complicated. But my father did not stop at that first year. He carried that lie forward through my childhood, through my Rumspringa, through my baptism into the church, through my wedding day, through the births of my own 6 children, through decades in which I was fully grown, fully capable, fully entitled to a truth that belonged to me as much as it belonged to him. Every single year that passed, he had another chance to set it right, and every single year, he chose the lie again. Not because a 4-year-old needed protecting anymore, but because he himself had grown so accustomed to the shape of that lie, so dependent on the dignity and simplicity it afforded him, that unwinding it began to feel, I think, impossible even to him. I share this not to end on a note of bitterness, but because I think there is a warning in it. A warning I hope some of you watching this might carry with you into your own lives, your own families. If you are protecting someone you love from a difficult truth, ask yourself honestly whether that protection still serves them, or whether it has become, instead, a habit that mostly serves your own comfort, your own fear of the conversation that truth would require. Children grow up. The people we once needed to shield from complexity become, eventually, entirely capable of holding it, and often stronger, not weaker, for having been trusted with it. I do not believe my father set out, in that terrible winter, to steal 63 years from his own children. I believe he simply never found the courage to stop the lie once it was told, and that failure of courage, more than any single wicked intention, is what cost us all so very much. I think, too, about how differently things might have gone if our community at that time had simply had better language, better understanding for what my mother was truly suffering. I do not say this to place all the blame outside my father, because the choice to lie was ultimately his own, made and remade every year of his life. But I do think it is worth saying, plainly, to anyone watching this who comes from a community, Amish or otherwise, where struggles of the mind are still met more often with silence than with compassion. Please do not let that silence be the thing that shapes the next 60 years of someone's life the way it shaped ours. Speak the harder truth. Seek the harder help. It is almost always, in the long run, the kinder path. Even when it does not feel that way, in the frightened moment the choice is first being made. I want to close this part of the story with one more small scene, because I think it captures, better than any single explanation I could offer, what has actually changed in me since I opened that cedar box 4 years ago. Last month, on an ordinary Tuesday, I was standing at my own kitchen counter, rolling out a pie crust using that trick my mother taught me on her visit last autumn. The butter folded in just so. And my youngest granddaughter wandered into the kitchen. The same little one who calls my mother Great-Grandma Katie without a second thought. And she asked me, the way small children ask things, plainly and without any awareness of how large the question actually was. Mommy said your mem used to be a secret. Was that scary? I set down my rolling pin and thought about how to answer her. This child who will never know what it was like to grow up believing a living woman was buried in a grave she would never see. I told her, as simply as I could manage, that yes, It had been scary, and sad too, for a very long time. But that secrets, even old and heavy ones, do not always stay secrets forever. And that sometimes, when a secret finally comes out into the light, it can bring something wonderful along with it. Something worth all the scary and sad parts that came before. She considered this for a moment, the way children do. And then she asked if she could help me with the pie. And just like that, the conversation moved on to flour and sugar, and the particular way the top crust needed to be crimped. And I stood there at my counter, an old woman with flour on her hands, watching a small girl who would grow up in a family finally free of the lie that had shaped nearly my entire life. And I felt, more clearly than I think I have ever felt it, that whatever this whole long ordeal had cost me, it had also, in its own strange and painful way, set something right that will ripple forward through every generation that comes after me. My grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, all the little ones still to come, will grow up knowing their history plainly, without the shadow of a lie hanging over their family's kitchen table the way it hung over mine for 63 years. That, I have come to believe, is its own kind of inheritance, quieter than a farm or a quilt or a recipe for pie crust, but no less real and no less precious. If you have made it this far with me, through this whole long story, I want to thank you, truly from the bottom of my heart, for sitting with me through something so personal. Something I have carried mostly in silence until deciding to share it here with you. I hope. Whatever your own family carries, whatever silences, whatever old griefs, whatever unanswered questions sit quietly in the corners of your own history, I hope you find whatever peace is available to you. Whether that peace comes through discovering a hidden truth the way I did, or through some other path entirely. Not every story ends the way mine has. But I believe, with everything in me, that truth, however painful, is almost always better than a comfortable lie, and that it is very rarely too late to go looking for what was taken from you. I think back sometimes to that little girl I once was, sitting at that burn-marked kitchen table at 4 years old, hearing the words "gone to be with God" for the very first time, believing them completely, because why would a father ever lie to his own small daughter about something so sacred? I wish, in a way I know is impossible, that I could reach back across all those years and tell her the truth sooner, not to spare her the eventual pain of discovery, because I have come to believe that pain, however late it arrived, was necessary and even, strangely, worth it. But simply to spare her 63 years of believing herself entirely motherless, when in fact, the whole time, somewhere out beyond the fences and fields of our small community, a woman was thinking of her every single day, writing letters into what must have felt like an endless, echoing silence, refusing, across 6 decades, to fully let go of the hope that a door might someday open again. I cannot reach back and tell that little girl the truth sooner, but I can tell you, whoever you are, watching this now, carrying whatever silence sits in the corners of your own family's history, it is very rarely too late. 63 years was not too late for us. Whatever number of years separates you from your own truth, I do not believe it is too late for you either. Before you go, I want to ask you one more time, please, to like this video if it moved you even a little, and to subscribe if you would like to hear more stories like this one, because I do have more to share, and I would be glad to have you along for those as well. And please, in the comments below, tell me where in the world you are watching this from. I read every single comment, and it warms an old woman's heart more than you know. To think of so many different places, so many different lives, sitting for a little while with mine. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting an old Amish woman tell you her story. Before I truly say goodbye, I want to leave you with one last thought. Something my mother said to me on that very first evening, as the sun went down over her small garden, and we finally, reluctantly, said our goodbyes after that first long day together. She told me, standing in that driveway, holding both of my hands in hers, that she had spent 63 years believing that the worst thing that had ever happened to her was the night she drove away in the dark, leaving her children behind, believing she was doing what needed to be done to save her own life. But she said that standing there with me finally, after all those years, she had come to see it differently. The worst thing, she said, was never the leaving. The worst thing was the silence that followed it, the decades of not knowing, not speaking, not reaching, and the most healing thing, the thing she said she would treasure for whatever years she had left, was simply this: 2 women, finally, choosing not to stay silent any longer. I hope you will choose the same, in whatever way your own life calls you to. I hope, whatever it is you are carrying, whatever question you have been afraid to ask, whatever door you have been afraid to knock on, you will find the courage, someday, to try. And I hope, if you found even a small piece of comfort or courage in this story today, you will remember to like this video, subscribe for more, and tell me down in the comments where in this wide world you were sitting when you heard an old woman tell you about the mother she thought she'd lost, and the mother she finally, impossibly, found. Thank you, truly, for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of each other, and take care of your own family's truth, whatever they may be.